today we're having a look at this book by Karl Deenick, Washed by God, The Story of Baptism. Will you please make Karl welcome? Welcome, Karl.
It's great to be here.
So when we hear about a book on baptism, probably a lot of us think, are you going to tell us about the who, babies or not, and the how, sprinkling or immersing? But you say right up front in this book that those are comparatively uninteresting topics to you. So what is the more interesting stuff that this book is about?
Yeah. So I actually love to talk about baptism, and I love this book.
So do I, Karl.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's the best book ever. But it's actually the fruit of just a lot of thinking over a lot of years. And I think baptism is really about trying to unpack, it's trying to about signify the gospel and what the gospel is. And really it's a window into some of the big themes of the Bible: justification, regeneration, sanctification, how the Old Testament and the New Testament fits together, how the work of Jesus opens up the way for a new work of the Spirit. It really is a very helpful lens through which to kind of stitch the kind of unfolding story of the Bible together. So it just opens our eyes, I think, more and more, at least it did for me, to the wonders of the gospel and particularly God's unfolding of that through salvation history.
Beautiful. It reads as a very accessible book, but it's not just like a summary of what other people have written, sort of put together for us to read. You've actually made some original proposals in here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, I guess this, like so many things in this area, it kind of flowed out of just my own thinking about the topic of baptism and my own confusion. And I sort of set myself on a 10 to 15 year journey, I guess, to kind of work on it. And there's two kind of maybe main ways in which I offer some new proposals. One is around kind of what is really the symbolism of baptism about, and that is we often think about cleansing and washing in terms of forgiveness from our sins, and forgiveness from our sins is very important part of the gospel, but really the symbolism of washing and cleansing, I think, in the scriptures is much more about the moral transformation that comes through the Spirit who comes to us through Jesus and unites us with Jesus. That's kind of one thing, I think. And then the other is I did my PhD on circumcision, which people connect in various ways with baptism and have different views about how that works. But what I found was not many people, in fact, you could count on one finger the number of people who'd done that before in any depth in the history of the church, actually. And so I kind of worked on this project. And what I discovered, I think, as I went along was, interestingly, I think both sides of the who and how debate had misunderstood how circumcision functioned in the Old Testament, and that actually led to the same confusion led to opposite understandings of baptism. And so what I've tried to do is show how maybe understanding circumcision in a better way can actually bring down some of the divides between those views on the who in particular.
Yeah, there's some good reasons there to have a read of this. Another good reason, I think, is that it's, I would describe it as pastorally sensitive and focused. You wrote this when you were a pastor. Didn't get published till you turned up here at SMBC, but how did being a pastor shape the way you wrote this?
Yeah, so I ended up in a church where people had different views on baptism. So we kind of had like an official position, but we had elders and members who had different views. And one of the reasons I ended up there was because I myself had struggled with this issue, and I sort of struggled with the idea that I used to say, if Don Carson turned up at my church, he couldn't, could he be an elder, because he had a different view on baptism to these people over here who didn't hold to that. And so that was the context I was operating in, with people with different views, which is great at one level. One of the dangers from that can be that flexibility can lead to a devaluing of scriptural truth and of baptism. So you might still do it, but people are just sort of so afraid of talking about it, or so flexible that it no longer is mentioned. And what I wanted to do was say, this is still important for us to think about. And it's a real gift from God. Baptism is a real gift from God to picture what the gospel is, and we lose that to our detriment. So even as we're being flexible and accommodating, it's a really precious gift that I want us to treasure.
Yeah, it's something we want to grapple with here at SMBC in an interdenominational environment, how to have different views but not devalue the thing we're disagreeing over. Yeah, and I think this book does an amazing job at holding up baptism, no matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it to, as something so special. I want to finish with a quote from you, Karl, if that's all right.
By all means.
My earnest desire is that this book, will not simply help people to understand baptism better, but that it will help people to love God and delight in him. Could you give us a little taste of how this book might do that?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, we often think about the forgiveness of sins, and I do think that is really important. How can all the things that I've done in my past, be dealt with, and the penalty for that and what I've done against God taken away? That is so important. But it really is only half the story, I think, that people wrestle with. And the other half of the story is all the muck that lives inside of me. I always think one of the most profound and disturbing questions is, why do I hurt the people that I love? Like, you can kind of rationalise why you might hurt people that you don't like, but why do you hurt people that you love? Why do you get angry at them? Why do you resent them? Why do you lie to them? Why do you intentionally set out to hurt them sometimes? And I think what that kind of question does is it raises the kind of issue of what we're like and who we are inside our hearts. And people have a real desire for that to be changed, not just for our past to be dealt with, but for who I am to be radically transformed. And I think the hope that baptism gives us is that kind of transformation, that in the gospel God offers to do that. Imagine if you could step into a shower, and come out not just clean on the outside, but clean on the inside. Like, who wouldn't, sell everything that they have, right? And buy that gift. And I think that's why I think baptism is such a wonderful gift to us, because it opens up to us that full-orbed nature of what the gospel promises.
That's great. Thank you, Karl. I love the way this is both theologically rich and pastorally sensitive. I love the way it points to and shines a light on the work of Jesus.